Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm greeting you from New York City. Only wish I was in Brazil. And I'm going to talk about the research I did for this book, Everybody Lies, which is about all the things you can learn about human beings from their internet behavior. But I'm going to start with a story that doesn't have anything to do with the internet and doesn't have anything to do with human beings. It's a story about horses. So this is American Pharaoh. And I don't know how many people know American Pharaoh, but in 2017, he became the first horse in 37 years to win the Triple Crown. That's basically the biggest honor in American racehorsing. And he be just like an incredible horse, a once in a generation horse. But when American Pharaoh was 1 year old, nobody thought that American Pharaoh was a special horse. There didn't seem to be anything all that remarkable about American Pharaoh. Nobody thought he was that special except for one man, Jeff Sater. And this story, you'll understand why I'm telling you this. This is all about data and the power of data analytics. So Jeff Sater's an interesting guy. He has 3 degrees from Harvard University, and he was 26 years old. He was working, he was living in New York City, working at Citibank. And he looked at himself one day in the mirror. He was wearing a suit and tie. And he said, "This isn't me. I'm not meant to live in New York. I'm not meant to work at a bank. I am living the wrong life." And he quit his job on the spot and moved to rural Pennsylvania. He wanted to be in the country, in the woods, and he wanted to be near horses. And he decided what he really wanted to devote his life to was seeing if he could figure out, predict what makes a great racehorse great. And he decided how he was going to do this. He was going to use data analytics. Some of you in this audience may have questions you want to answer with data analytics. And this was, many, many years ago, before data analytics was such a hot thing. He was really ahead of the curve. So he decided, I want to collect data and find out what it is really about horses that predicts they're going to be great. And Jeff Sater started his project after quitting his lucrative job at Citibank. And he tried many, 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 many things to try to predict what makes racehorses great. So one of the things he tried is he measured, he's a kind of an eccentric guy. He does things his own way. He has a lot of theories. He's a little, some people say he's a little crazy. I think he's more a genius, but he always has interesting ideas. And he decided he was going to measure the size of horse nostrils. The idea was that horses that had big, wide nostrils would breathe better and they'd run faster. So Jeff Sater went outside a barn and took his little ruler and measured just how wide every horse's nostril was. And he collected what is to this day the largest horse nostril data set ever assembled. And he has this spreadsheet with all these horses, just how wide their nostrils are. Then he has this other column, how fast they eventually ran, how many races they won, how much money they earned. He put the two together to see if horses with big nostrils ran faster. And Jeff Sater found out that no, size of nostrils does not work. It does not predict racing success. I mentioned already that Jeff Sater's, another thing he measured, maybe makes a little more sense. The volume of the fast twitch muscles, basically the muscles in horses' legs, kind of makes sense. You'd think that horses that had big, strong legs would run faster. So he measured a whole bunch of horses, how big their leg muscles were. He put this in his spreadsheet, correlated this with how fast the horses eventually ran. And he found that volume of fast twitch muscles didn't work. It does not predict racehorse success. I said that Jeff Sater is a little bit out there. He has some wild ideas. I actually flew down to Ocala, Florida, a small town in Florida, to meet with Jeff Sater and understand his ways. And he explained to me that he once measured the size of horse poop. He had a theory that horses that had big, wide poops would run faster. He tried to explain this theory to me. It made absolutely no sense. To this day, I have no idea what he was thinking, why he thought that poop size would be a predictor of horse race success. But nonetheless, Jeff Sater measured that poop, put it in his spreadsheet, correlated that with how fast the horses eventually ran, how much money they earned, And he found that the size of defecations, the size of horses' poop didn't work. It does not predict horse race success. So Jeff Sater had quit his lucrative job at Citibank, 3 degrees from Harvard University, quit his job to try to predict horse racing success, and was, by all accounts, failing in his project. I think he was going pretty close to bankrupt. He was a little bit in a rough way when he came up with a new idea many, many years into his project. He was going to measure the size of horses' hearts. He built with scientists the first EKG to measure the internal organs of horses, including the size of their hearts, including all the chambers of their hearts, including the size of their left ventricles, one of the particular chambers in their heart. And he put this in his spreadsheet. He correlated this with how fast the horses ran, how much money they eventually earned. And Jeff Sater found out that the size of the left ventricle, it works. It does predict horse racing success. Horses with big left ventricles run faster than everybody else. Which brings us back to how I started this story. American Pharoah, remember, first horse in 37 years to win America's Triple Crown, greatest racehorse of a generation. Jeff Sater was the only one on the planet who predicted that American Pharoah would be a great racehorse. And when I flew to Florida to meet with him, he showed me the card he had on American Pharoah. He had data. This is on the height of American Pharoah, 56th percentile. This shows that American Pharoah was taller than 56 out of 100 horses, nothing particularly remarkable. Weight, 61st percentile, a little bit better, but nothing all that special. Pedigree, that's his relatives, parents, grandparents, siblings. Do they run fast? This is how most horse consultants predict which horses will be great. 70th percentile. So this is what everybody knew about American Pharoah, but Jeff Sater knew something else about American Pharoah. He used his EKG, measured that heart, and he found American Pharoah's left ventricle was 99.61st percentile, better than just about every other horse he had seen. Enormous left ventricle. This allowed Jeff Sater to say, no matter what everybody said, American Pharoah was an amazing, amazing, amazing horse. He made this prediction when American Pharoah was won well before American Pharoah turned out to be the greatest racehorse of his generation. So what can we learn from this story, from Jeff Sater's story of predicting racehorse success? I think there are really 4 lessons that I take from this story and that I want all of you to take from this story. About data analysis, as more industries are moving towards data, I think there are 4 lessons from Jeff Sater's story and quest, really, that you can take with you. First, the value of a data set is frequently not its size, not how big it is its newness. So if you think of how Jeff Sater was able to revolutionize our understanding of horse racing, it was not because he had a bigger data set than everybody else. In fact, a lot of you, if you work at all with data scientists, you'll know that there are data sets that have terabytes of information, that have billions of observations, that you need special computers to even process. Jeff Sater's analysis could be done in an Excel spreadsheet, thousands of observations, not a huge data set, but what Jeff Sater had was something new. He had information that other people didn't have, particularly the size of the left ventricle. Lesson number 2, winners in the world of big data are entrepreneurial. Very, very important. So I think a lot of people who are excited about the potential of data science to better understand their fields, to stay ahead of their competition, accept the data that everybody else is using. So if everybody's using this type of market research, you try to get on board, use that type of market research. I think what Jeff Sater was able to do was to go out and get new data by being entrepreneurial that other people weren't looking for. Lesson number 3, winners in the world of big data fail a lot on their way to finding the big winner. Really, really important. I think, a lot of people hope that their analysts or their data scientists are going to come back and give them a major insight right away. that isn't always how it works. Data scientists have to be allowed to fail. They have to be allowed to try lots of things to eventually find that big winner. Another way to say this is you have to measure the poop to find the left ventricle. There's kind of no other way. You have to go through all these things, try many, many years even of looking for things until you find that big winner. Be entrepreneurial, find that new data. Lesson number four, and maybe the most important lesson and the most exciting lesson, I would say by far, there are left ventricles out there. So it's an inspiring story, the Jeff Sater story, which is that basically you can, by using data science, data analysis, know an industry way better than everybody else. So Jeff Sater just blew his competition away by measuring the left ventricle, by using his EKG, by understanding how body parts really influence horse race success. So, if you get that new data, if you're entrepreneurial, if you're willing to fail a lot, you can find potentially the equivalent of a left ventricle in whatever field you're in. And I've seen it in so many different domains. So I kind of like to leave organizations or people with kind of the question, what are the left ventricles waiting to be found in your industry? And how are you going to be the one to find it instead of maybe one of your competitors? Okay, but probably everybody in this audience, certainly myself, I've never studied animals. I study human beings, and I use data to understand human beings. And when you use data to understand human beings, you have to keep in mind a very, very important lesson. It's a lesson made famous by Dr. House in the television show. Everybody lies, and they particularly lie to the traditional source to understanding human beings. So a lot of times, to understand what people are doing or thinking, you ask people, you conduct a survey. And this is very, very important information and can be really, really powerful on many dimensions. But on socially sensitive topics, you have to be a little more careful that people might shade things, and you have to correct for it, that people might shade things in the direction of what they want you to think, not what they're really doing or thinking. So for example, in America, if you ask people after an election, did you vote in the election? And I find this somewhat shocking. In some studies, more than 50% of non-voters lie to surveys. They say, I voted, even though administrative records, we know they did not vote in the election. So people want to say, yes, 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 I was a good citizen. I did what I was supposed to do to help advance American democracy, even if they didn't vote. Maybe a more fun example, an R-rated example, is sexual behavior. So the General Social Survey, it's out of the University of Chicago, a major survey about American attitudes and behaviors. They ask people about their sexual lives. They ask people, how often do you have sex and do you use a condom? And if you ask heterosexual women, how frequently do you have sex? They say they average sex about once a week. They use a condom about 20% of the time. You do the math, heterosexual women in the United States are reporting they're using about 1.1 billion condoms every year in heterosexual sexual encounters. You do the exact same questions, but you ask men, what happens? Well, men basically say they're having more sex. Using condoms about the same, but having more sex, having so much more heterosexual sex, they're using 1.6 billion condoms every year in heterosexual sex. Does everybody watching along understand that these numbers, by definition, have to be the same? We know that somebody is not telling the truth here. There are a certain number of condoms used every year in heterosexual sexual encounters, and these numbers should be identical. There is something going off here. Somebody is not telling the truth about how much sex they're having. So who's telling the truth, men or women? I reached out to Nielsen. They collect data on how many condoms are sold every year in the United States. And they told me that in the United States, 600 million condoms are sold, much lower than the numbers reported by either men or women, which means that both groups are lying, just men more than women. Basically, in today's day and age where everybody wants everybody else, there's a lot of social pressure to be having a lot of sex. Everybody, men and women, men a little more than women, don't feel comfortable necessarily admitting that they're not having that much sex. All right. But now we have a new method to understand human beings, and that is we can use anonymous and aggregate data from people's Google searches. So I spent 5 to 8 years studying Google search data. And I think it's a totally remarkable, game-changing, revolutionary data set into the human psyche, partly because people are really, really, really honest on Google. So they tell Google things that they might not tell to surveys. They tell Google things that they might not tell to husbands, wives, parents, sons, daughters, friends, doctors. People pour their hearts out to Google. I call Google digital truth serum, because something about that little white box gets people to say what they're really thinking, what they're really desiring, to open up in many ways. And again, we can analyze this data anonymous, aggregate, protect everybody's privacy, and really understand the human psyche in ways that we previously never have. So when you analyze Google search data, you immediately see a very, very different window of human beings than from survey data. So for example, worldwide, historically, there have been more searches for porn than for weather. This is even though if you ask people in surveys, 20% of men, sometimes 5% of women admit to watching porn. Well, if you analyze Google search data, you get a very, very different window where, again, porn is more popular than weather. Presumably everybody's admitting that they're checking the weather. So again, the search is very different from what people are maybe telling us. And over again, we're seeing that data from Google, anybody watching along, you can Google Trends and play around with the data set. It's not necessarily the most user-friendly site always, but you can get some important insights into customers, into your industry, into competitors, into just the world around you, the zeitgeist, by playing around with Google Trends. And when scholars have analyzed this data, they found many examples where Google data has been more accurate than survey data for measuring attitudes or behaviors. So some examples, predicting who will turn out and vote. I said it's very, very hard. You can't necessarily just ask people, are you going to vote? Because many people lie. They say they're going to vote, even if they have absolutely no intention to vote. Well, there is data from Google searches, how to vote, where to vote, voting places. These searches are highly predictive of eventual turnout rates. If a lot of people in an area are making these searches, you can expect that more people in that area 2 weeks, 3 weeks later are going to go out and vote. Very, very sad, dark topic, but important area, suicide. A lot of people turn to Google, suicidal help, suicide hotline, how to commit suicide, want to commit suicide, suicidal. All these searches, scholars have shown, very predictive of actual suicide rates in an area, and more predictive than surveys asking people if they've had suicidal ideation. So I think we need to think as a society, what do we do with this information? How can we use this data to potentially help people, to potentially save lives? Another area, it's a dark area. This was actually the first study I ever did with Google search data, measuring racism. So if you ask people in a survey, are you racist? What do you think they say? No, 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 of course not. Not me. I'm not racist. Certainly in the United States, my country, where I've done most of my research, being racist is, and maybe this is a good thing, socially unacceptable. So people do not feel comfortable telling others, even surveys, that they have racist attitudes. So I was shocked by how frequently people make explicitly racist searches on Google. This is a map of Google searches for the N-word. And the first thing that surprised me when I did this analysis was how frequently these searches are made. So in the time period I was looking at, people searched the N-word with the same frequency they searched Lakers, migraine, economists. It wasn't a fringe search. Millions of Americans were making this search every year. So that surprised me. Surprise number two, location of the searches. Again, I don't know how many of you know too much about American geography or American history, but as someone who spent many years as a kid in school learning American history, one of the major lessons is there's a big divide in racial attitudes between the North and the South. So the Civil War was fought between the North and the South. North opposed slavery, South supported slavery. Jim Crow laws popular in the South. Realignment of political parties, Southern realignment, all based on Southern attitudes towards race, towards African Americans, towards how African Americans will be treated. And so I just assumed if there was a measure of racism, it would be predominantly concentrated in the South. And certainly in this map, darker red means more racism. Certainly parts of the South do rank very, very high, among the highest. Parts of southern Mississippi, parts of southern Louisiana, parts of South Carolina, parts of northwestern Florida. But right up there near the top, West Virginia, northern state, western Pennsylvania, eastern Ohio, upstate New York. If you really had to divide the country based on racial attitudes these days, according to my analysis of Google search data, if you had to divide the country into two, the divide would be East versus West. You can kind of see it's not a perfect relationship, but the map gets much lighter in the western part of the United States. And I think there is strong evidence that racism these days is much lower in the western United States than the eastern United States. All right, so basically what this data showed us, and this is, again, not a cheery finding, but an important finding, I think, is that there has been a lot of secret racism that hasn't been captured by traditional surveys in the United States. And this map of racist Google searches predicts a lot of other outcomes of African Americans being treated poorly. Parts of the country that are higher on racist searches, Barack Obama, the first African American candidate, major presidential candidate, one of the general election presidential candidate, did worse in parts of the country with higher racism. African Americans have lower wages in parts of the country with higher racism, it's been shown. African Americans live less long in places with higher racism. This secret racism seems to be really driving a lot of outcomes, and that is not, it does seem there is strong evidence now that there's secret racists in the United States that are treating Black people badly, and it's not being captured by traditional sources. And I did this research. I started this research in 2012, so it's already been 9 years. And initially, the research was considered kind of a little weird. Are you really going to use Google searches to measure racism? A lot of people thought it was a little crazy, a little wacky. And then Donald Trump in 2016, I'm sure you all paid some attention to that, ran for president. And when Donald Trump was running for president, he said some things that were racially charged, at least. So he started his modern political campaign by questioning whether Barack Obama, the first Black president, was born in the United States. He retweeted false statistics about how frequently African Americans commit crimes. He didn't repudiate support from David Duke, a leader of the KKK. And every time he did one of these things, all the serious sources, the pundits, they said, Trump's finished. He's over. He's done. You cannot say something like that in the United States and be a serious political candidate. Yet every time he did better. He won more primaries. He won more races. So Nate Cohn, he's a data journalist at the New York Times. He had known about the research I had done using Google searches to measure racism. He had data on support for Donald Trump in the Republican primary. And he said, is your racism measure correlated with how well Donald Trump is doing in these primaries? And he found it was the strongest indicator he could find, stronger than demographics, stronger than economic variables, stronger than attitudes towards immigration or guns or trade or anything you can imagine. The biggest predictor, Nate Cohn reported, and Nate Silver, a famous data journalist at 538, has said the same thing. Strongest predictor, racist searches on Google. So I think, I'm not saying that everybody who supported Donald Trump is racist. I have friends who support Donald Trump, and I know they're not racist. That said, I think his early support was helped significantly by a cohort of secret racists in the United States who were really troubled that Barack Obama had become the first Black president of the United States. All right, more data. There's just so much that can be done with Google search data. So this is an article I wrote April 5th, 2020, during the early part of the COVID pandemic. So a lot of people reached out to me. They said, Seth, you're an expert on Google searches. Can you tell us anything about the disease? And uh, initially I said, I don't know. I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm not a health expert. Maybe I shouldn't be studying this topic, but there was so much uncertainty in that period. And I felt like I had this expertise in search data. I've been studying search data for 7, 8 years. Let me at least see what I can find, put my findings out there into the world. And then other people with more expertise in health, epidemiologists, medical professionals, they can explore these topics even further. So what did I find? First thing I found, searches for loss of smell were almost perfect predictors of rates of COVID in an area. So basically, in the time period I was looking at, the COVID-19, the disease, was high in different parts of the United States. New York, where I live, New Jersey, right near New York, but then other states, seemingly a little bit random, high in Michigan, high in Louisiana. And what you saw is in the week that I had done the research, the places that were highest for COVID were also making the most searches, saying with people saying they lost their smell. People were searching things like loss of smell, I can't smell, can't smell help. We know, of course, that loss of smell is a major symptom of the disease, with some people suggesting that as many as 30% of people with COVID lose their sense of smell. And this relationship, I don't know how many of you in the audience have played around with data on human beings, but data on human beings tend to be very, very messy. It's a little wild. It's a little chaotic. There are technical terms, the R squared, that's the goodness of fit. You might see an R squared of 0.2, 0.3, that's a good relationship. The R squared on searches for loss of smell and rates of COVID for this week in the United States was 0.9, which is just insane. Like, you don't see relationships like this in the messy world of human beings often. So highly, highly predictive. And there has been further research suggesting that it has continued to be predictive, both in the United States and in different parts of the world, that when people are making searches for loss of smell, you can expect that more people have COVID in that area. Another study I did, I said, is there any way, there's so much uncertainty about this disease, lack of knowledge, it was such a chaotic period. Could we find new symptoms of the disease using Google searches? So basically I just said, we know there are certain areas right now that in that time period that had very, very high rates of COVID. So I said New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Michigan, Louisiana, different places around the world. What symptoms, now that so many people have COVID, what symptoms are people searching on Google? And many of the symptoms were things that at that point were well-known symptoms of COVID. So I mentioned loss of smell, fever, diarrhea, things that the doctors had acknowledged, the medical professionals had acknowledged were symptoms of COVID. But another search that was highly concentrated in parts of the United States that had high rates of COVID was searches for eye pain. My eyes hurt. And at that time, again, you saw the article was written April 5th, 2020, eye pain was not considered a symptom of COVID. It was not a known symptom of COVID. And I looked, okay, not just the United States, when there was a big outbreak of COVID in Iran, there was a big rise in searches for eye pain. When there was a big outbreak of COVID in Spain, there was a big rise of searches for eye pain. When there's a big outbreak of COVID in Italy, there was a big rise in searches for eye pain. So I said, look, again, I'm not a medical professional, but just based on everything I've seen, eye pain isn't acknowledged as a symptom. I'm just telling you that I've looked at the data a million ways. And when COVID enters an area, more people complain that their eyes hurt. So I wrote this article, and many months later, there was kind of the biggest publication on this topic in the journal Global Ophthalmology, that sore eyes was a significant ocular symptom experienced by people with COVID-19. Indeed, eye pain appears now to be a symptom, not that everybody who has COVID has it, but that some percentage of people with COVID have it. And I think that information was seen in Google search data well before it was discovered by the medical professionals with traditional methodologies. So again, you're seeing the power of this data to really see things before they show up in other ways. Okay, so that's Google search data. Revolutionary data source. I really encourage anybody in the audience to play around with Google Trends and see if you can find anything. But one thing I want to caution people, everyone's excited by big data now, big data, big data, big data. And one thing I want to always caution people, all big data is not the same. You always have to think of the quality of the data you're getting. People are almost too deferential to data. When they see a number, they say that's the truth. And you have to be more clever than that. And you have to really dig into the data. I talked about surveys that sometimes people exaggerate behaviors that they're proud of and minimize how often they have thoughts or engage in actions that they may be less proud of. And in bigger data sources, we also have sometimes the data can be misleading in various ways to try to understand the world. So if you think of Google data, I said that's digital truth serum because people are so honest on Google. People pour out their hearts on Google. They talk about their suicidal thoughts. They talk about their racist thoughts. They talk about health symptoms that they might be embarrassed about. Compare that to maybe the other largest data set collected on the human psyche. That would be Facebook. Are people honest on Facebook in the same way they're honest to Google? I would say no, not even close. In their Facebook posts, Facebook is not digital truth serum. Facebook does not get people to say what they're really thinking or confess their secrets. In fact, I call Facebook digital brag to my friends about how good my life is serum, which is a bit of a long term, I realize. But basically what that means is when people are posting on Facebook or when people are liking things on Facebook, they're not necessarily confessing their deepest secrets or their most embarrassing thoughts. They're frequently saying things that they think will impress their friends in various ways. And we see over and over again that data from Facebook can be very misleading when it comes to understanding people. So for example, I compared these two magazines. These are, again, My Country's America. So the examples are based in America. But this is two magazines, The Atlantic Monthly and The National Enquirer. So The Atlantic Monthly is a very, very serious, highbrow, intellectual magazine. It talks about political theory and it has, very deep analyses of science and does poems occasionally. Compare that to the National Enquirer. National Enquirer, lowbrow, trashy magazine. It talks about celebrity gossip. It says who's sleeping with whom or who divorced whom or who put on weight. So The Atlantic, highbrow, National Enquirer, lowbrow. We actually know how popular these two magazines are. There's data on how many copies are sold. Actual copies purchased, we know that the National Enquirer, the lowbrow celebrity gossip magazine, 3 times more popular than the highbrow Atlantic Monthly. So more people, when they're by themselves, are pouring through, this person got divorced, this person is going through a rough time, this person had an affair, than reading the Atlantic Monthly, the gossipy magazine. Now, what happens on Facebook when people have to like the magazines, say which one they like, and all your friends might see your Facebook likes? Is the Atlantic Monthly highbrow? Is the National Enquirer, the lowbrow magazine, 3 times more popular than the Atlantic Monthly and Facebook likes? It isn't. In fact, the Atlantic Monthly, the highbrow magazine, is more popular on Facebook. In fact, it is 45 times more popular on Facebook. So 45 times more people like or comment on Atlantic Monthly articles than National Enquirer articles on Facebook. Why? Everybody wants their friends to think they're so intellectual, that they're thinking about serious things. They're reading serious articles. They're having serious discussions. People don't want to admit their lowbrow tastes. So again, Facebook misleading because people are bragging to their friends in various ways. A fun little study I did was comparing social media and search on the exact same topic. So I looked at how do people describe their husbands on social media, public, all your friends see, and search, private, nobody sees. So Facebook, brag to your friends, Google, digital truth serum. How are husbands described on these two topics? So the first thing I looked at was social media posts that begin, my husband is. So again, these are posts people are making, my husband is, and all your friends are going to see how you describe your husband in this way. So what happens? My husband is a social media post. So you can maybe guess along if you're thinking while watching. What do you think the most common descriptor of husbands are on social media when people are posting? All your friends see it. My husband is. Okay, number one is my husband is the best. Number two, my best friend. Number three, amazing. Number four, the greatest. And number five, so cute. So that is marriage according to Facebook, social media, when it's public. This is how people describe their husbands. Now, what happens in people's searches? Anonymous, private, by oneself. Nobody knows what you're typing. People at Google, my husband is. What are the top descriptions of husbands on Google? Does that match this very, very positive view of marriage that we see on social media? So what are the top 5 searches my husband is? And I looked at this, do they match social media? And one of the things I found that actually is the most surprising thing in this research is the 3rd most popular Google search my husband is, at least in the time I looked at. These might change a little bit, different time periods. It's my husband is amazing, which is exactly the same as the 3rd most common social media post. My husband is amazing. And that's shocking to me because why are you telling Google that? Like, why are you typing my husband is amazing on Google? What's Google going to do? There's nothing really for Google to do in this situation. I guess congratulate you somehow. And I think one of the more surprising things in research in Google search data is that people type complete sentences into Google. So we understand why people ask questions of Google. So it makes people are looking for information. It makes sense. You ask, who won the soccer game last night? What's the recipe for apple pie? What's the weather tomorrow? We understand why anybody would turn to Google with these questions, but people with surprising frequency put statements into Google. They type, I hate my boss. I'm drunk. I'm 35 years old. And it's kind of like, why are you telling Google that? What are they going to do? There's nothing, there's no question there. There's just a statement. I think one of the things I've concluded is that people are in such a habit of confessing their secrets to Google, of typing things like searches for porn or searches that they're thinking about suicide or embarrassing health conditions, that people just kind of get comfortable pouring their heart out to Google. They treat that search box the same way that Catholics have traditionally used the confessional, that they basically, there's something comforting. There's something comforting about just typing full statements into that box. So they also type things like, my husband is amazing. Again, no reason that Google could do anything in this situation. No question there, just my husband is amazing. Pretty funny search if you ask me. So that's the 3rd most common Google search, my husband is. Same on a social media search, the exact same. Do the other Google searches that people make about their husbands match the searches, the posts they make about their husbands on social media? And the answer is a resounding no. The other most common Google searches, my husband is on Google, my husband is gay, a jerk, annoying, and mean. So I think that's kind of both an amusing and I would argue a profound comparison of social media posts and Google searches. uh, based on the different incentives that are offered to people. When things are public, people say my husband is the best, my best friend. When things are private, my husband is a jerk, my husband is annoying, my husband is mean. Very, very different. It just shows how different data can be depending on the incentives you give people. That if the data is going to be public, people will say one thing. The data is private and you're giving them information, people will say a very, very different thing. So really, really important to keep in mind. Another power of big data is something I call zooming in. And this is a study about baseball. Again, I'm from the United States. My examples are American. I wish I had a soccer map of Brazil. Unfortunately, I don't know anything about soccer, or I know very, very little about soccer. So this is a map of baseball fandom. This is my favorite map. And if someone watching could think of a way to reproduce this for soccer in Brazil, that would be super interesting. And you can imagine how cool it could be. That this is basically a map of the most popular baseball team in every part of the United States. So this shows it uses Facebook data, Facebook likes, and it was done in the New York Times. So basically what it shows is, okay, in Minnesota, the Twins are the most popular team. In Atlanta, the Braves are the most popular team. Parts of Florida, the Rays are the most popular. Parts of Florida, the Marlins are the most popular. But what's really cool about this map, and you can see my eyes are lighting up, my mouth is widening. This is my favorite map because I'm a huge baseball fan. But the coolest thing about this map is you can zoom in and find the exact point at which one team becomes more popular than another team. And I'm sure there's a similar thing you could do with soccer. So the Yankees and Red Sox are two popular Northeastern baseball teams. And forever it's been debated, what's the border at which the Yankees become more popular than the Red Sox? And you can see with this map, the precise point at which the Red Sox become more popular than the Yankees. And what I want you to all think about is how it's only possible to do this map with an enormous data set like Facebook or Google or Instagram, because you need a huge data set to zoom in to tiny corners of the United States, to have enough of a sample size to know the most popular team in Springfield or Providence or New Bedford or New Bedford or Waterbury or New Haven, Bridgeport. A survey of 2,000 people, it's not going to have enough people to zoom in to the degree that Facebook data or Google data allows us to do. So huge power of big data sets allows us to zoom in. I love baseball so much. I'm going to do my own study on this. And I was looking at basically and I was going to look at, this is, again, non-baseball fans may not be as enchanted by this study as I am, but hopefully you'll at least be enchanted by how enchanted I am by it. This is the percent of baseball fans. New York has two baseball teams, the Mets and the Yankees. And this is the percent of baseball fans that like each team among men born at every different age. And what you see if you look closely is this chart goes up and down and up and down again. What's going on? Why are the Mets most popular among men born in 1962, men born in 1978? Well, basically what happens is the Mets won 2 World Series, one in 1969 and one in 1986. So boys were about 8 years old when the Mets won the World Series. And now as adults, it's revealed on Facebook, they're still fans of the Mets instead of the Yankees because the Mets won the World Series. And when you actually do this across all the baseball teams among people of every age, you see that basically the popularity of a team, a team gets a lifelong popularity boost if you win a championship among boys who are between the ages of 5 and 15, and with the biggest boost among boys that are about 8 years old. So basically, if a baseball team wins a championship when boys are 8 years old, those boys are going to be significantly more likely, about 8 percentage points more likely to be fans of that team their entire lives. That there's a key period where basically male fans are imprinted and on a team. And maybe, those of you watching can think in your own experience. I don't know if you're soccer fans. I shouldn't even say soccer. It's football probably to you guys. But if you're football fans or whatever sport you like, who was good when you were 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old, 11 years old? Did that influence you such that you're still fans of that team, supporters, that club, now many years later? Really cool to see that in the data. And again, it requires that zooming in, that precise look at things that's only possible with these big data sets available now. There's one more topic I want to get into, and it's another disturbing topic, but it has an optimistic spin. So the studies I've talked about so far, they've been kind of just documenting problems in society. So there's too much racism in society. It's revealed in the search data. There's suicidal thoughts. There are health problems, COVID, there are all these things. And it's great knowing these problems, but really the point of data science, data analysis is not just knowing things, it's making decisions based on that, changing behaviors, changing attitudes, improving the world, improving your business. And I think data can really help on that dimension as well. I'm going to close on a story that I think really makes that point. And it's a story about hatred towards Muslim Americans. And it turns out that some people make really nasty searches on Google about Muslims. They say things like, kill Muslims, I hate Muslims, Muslims must die. Really nasty things, F-word Muslims, like just nasty things about Muslim Americans. And you could say about Muslims, and these searches again are in the United States, and you could say, well, do we care that people are searching things like I hate Muslims, kill Muslims? These people are probably maniacs. They're angry people. They're enraged people. Does it matter that they're making these seemingly crazy searches on Google? It turns out that it does. I did research with Evan Soltas. He was then at Princeton University. And we found that these searches predict hate crimes against Muslims. So when more people are making searches like kill Muslims, I hate Muslims, Muslims must die, those weeks, there are more hate crimes against Muslims. More mosques are attacked. More Muslims are beaten up on the street. Sometimes more Muslims are even killed. So really important information in these crazy searches. Now, 2016, there was an attack, the San Bernardino attack in California. 2 people, Muslim Americans, shot and killed a whole bunch of people. And immediately after this attack, there was a huge rise in searches for kill Muslims, I hate Muslims. These nasty searches went through the roof. A lot of people were angry at Muslims because Muslims had committed a terrorist attack. And the Google just showed minute by minute, literally minutes after it was announced on the news that the suspects had Muslim sounding names, there was a huge rise in these nasty searches, which again, as our research shows, means something because a certain fraction of these people making these crazy searches are going to attack Muslims. So that's not encouraging. We were disturbed by this, and someone else was disturbed with this. This is again, many years ago, President Obama, Barack Obama was president. He was disturbed by this. He made a speech to the nation about not just terrorism, but also hatred towards Muslims. And it was a nationally televised speech. It got a lot of attention. And Barack Obama talked about the importance of fighting hate, of not giving in to hate. He said that it's our responsibility to love our neighbors, to love Muslims, to not judge people based on their religion, to accept people of different religions into our country. Very moving material, kind of classic Obama. If you guys remember his speeches, always very powerful, always very thoughtful, always very articulate, always very moving. So Soltas and I were looking at the data minute by minute, and we said, okay, well, what happens after this speech to these searches? So we see Obama, making these statements. what happens to these nasty searches to Muslims, against Muslims? And we found that the nasty searches about Muslims, they didn't drop. They didn't even stay the same. They went way up. So as Obama was saying this stuff, responsibility to love Muslims, don't judge people based on their religion, accept people into our country no matter their religion, more people are turning to Google saying things like, I hate Muslims, Muslims must die, kill Muslims. So that's discouraging, that a well-meaning speech by a well-meaning man could, if anything, enrage this mob. And we published, so that was discouraging, but there was something a little more encouraging in the data. At the end of the speech, Obama said something else. He said, we have to remember that Muslim Americans are our friends and neighbors. They're our sports heroes, and they're the men and women who will die for our country. As soon as Obama said this, huge rise in searches, Muslim athletes, Muslim soldiers. People wanted to learn, who are these people that Obama is saying, these sports heroes, these men and women dying for our country. And then you see around the internet, on social media, on message boards, young men, people most at risk of committing hate crimes, they're tweeting, I didn't know Hakeem Olajuwon was Muslim. I didn't know Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was Muslim. I didn't know Shaquille O'Neal's Muslim. So these people are saying, wow, I didn't know that that my favorite sports heroes are Muslim American. And so we published a New York Times column about this. And we said that basically our analysis of the data is that there are two approaches Obama took in his speech. One of them did not work, and one of them possibly did work. So what did not work? What didn't work is lecturing people, telling people what's their responsibility, giving them information, giving them lines and sermons they've been told 1,000 times before. What might have worked, what might have been more successful, was provoking their curiosity, giving them new information, changing the way they think of this group that is causing them so much anger, so much rage. So we published this New York Times. I don't think it's crazy when you write a New York Times column to think that powerful people read it, maybe people even in Obama's staff, because a few weeks later, Obama gave another speech in a Baltimore mosque. And again, this speech got a lot of attention. Again, it was on national TV. But this time, Obama's tactics were very, very different. He doubled down, tripled down, maybe quadrupled down on the curiosity strategy that the data from Google suggests worked the first time. So he said, we have to remember that Muslim Americans are farmers and merchants. Muslim Americans are friends and neighbors. Muslim Americans are firemen and soldiers and athletes. So we have to remember that Muslim Americans built the skyscraper in Chicago. The first mosque was in North Dakota. Thomas Jefferson had a copy of the Quran in his office. Like all this stuff that makes people think, wow, Muslim Americans had a very different place in American history than I realized. And what happens after this speech, when Obama took this very different path, when he tried to provoke people's curiosity, well, many of the nasty searches towards Muslims, they dropped. So I'm not saying from these two little studies that we've cured racism in the world, or we know, exactly how to fight racism. But I think what this shows is the power of new data to basically revolutionize the social sciences, to revolutionize our understanding of humankind, that you're basically able to use this information to do something as seemingly crazy as learning how to calm an angry mob. So I'm going to leave you with that story. I think an optimistic story. And you can learn more in my book, Everybody Lies, some of my New York Times columns by Googling my name, and learn just a lot more about how you can use these tools yourself for whatever you're trying to do. So I hope you've enjoyed this talk, and I hope you've learned something, and I hope that you use some of these tools, even if you're not a data scientist yourself. Just be aware of some of these tools that are out there and how they might help you make better decisions, help you improve your business, help you change the world. There's really, really powerful information in data analytics now. So with that, I'm gonna end my talk, and I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you very much to everybody for attending.